All right, everybody, thank you very much for coming to the Twitch chat with Bruce Cordell, talking about Jade Colossus, Myth of the Maker, and some other recent projects by him. We've got a couple people in the chat room, and I have a few questions from the internet that we prepared ahead of time. And we'll just start with one of those, and then if anybody has any questions, just feel free to mention them in the text chat, and we will present them to Bruce.
Well, can we just start by you should introduce who you are, and in case, I'm sure everyone knows the great Sean Reynolds, but let's let everyone know all the basics.
All right, well, despite my computer saying that I'm Charles Ryan, I am actually Sean K. Reynolds, using Charles's account for our video software. Yeah, I worked with Bruce at TSR and Wizards of the Coast, and now I'm part of MCG along with Bruce. Bruce and I were some of the last people hired to work at TSR, and he has had a long, illustrious career writing many adventures and source books, and has traveled all over the country and many parts of the world to talk about game design and his work in fiction and RPG. So welcome, Bruce. Thank you very much for coming on our Twitch show.
Thanks, Sean. And yes, we worked together since 1995. And I walked into TSR and I was getting the tour, and I remember meeting this tall dude, no hair, and these big black plastic, looked like some sort of warrior things on your wrist. I was like, who's that guy? I guess turned out to be you. Much nicer than my first impression of you in the corner.
My carpal tunnel guards that I had at the time were very intimidating, I suppose.
Yeah, I didn't know what those were.
That's all right.
Ripe young age of 27.
That's right, back in the day. So we're here to talk about some of your recent work. The one that went on pre-order this week is Jade Colossus, which is a source book and adventure for Numenera. How about you just give us a quick summary of Jade Colossus and maybe provide a snippet of something that's not in any of the text descriptions that we've had so far.
Oh, well, that would require me to know what all those are. Well, all right, so Numenera, of course, is a science fantasy that's set, a billion years in the future of this Earth. Civilizations have risen and fallen, and they reached crazy heights that are just inscrutable by today's standards, right? And they left these remains that are just these crazy artifacts and ruins and structures, so much so that the Earth of the Ninth World is just, literally that's the landscape. Just, that ridge over there might actually be the cliffside of some ancient 2 million year old structure, right? So that's Numenera already. Jade Colossus was the idea of let's do one of these and just really get into it, right? Let's just dive into one of these crazy prior world ruins that's immense in size, right? And the Jade Colossus, I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's like more than a mile tall at its highest dimension, and it's really wide and it's expansive. And there was a city there before it burst out of the earth about 5 years ago. And that city, even though it was partially destroyed, has been rebuilt, and they're only grown larger as people have streamed in from all around Navarine and other parts of the Steadfast and beyond to explore this crazy place, right? And it is pretty much what the quintessential idea of what exploring Numenera weird is. That's what we wanted for the Jade Colossus, right? It's not understandable. You might walk into a room, and if you're not careful, your skin could be turned to gelatin, right? For no apparent reason, but it was probably some part of some mechanism in this ancient structure that had some completely other different purpose that we can barely understand, and maybe you'll escape with a couple ciphers and an artifact or maybe some additional knowledge. So that's kind of the idea behind the Jade Colossus. And so there's several sections in the book. We also wanted to have an opportunity to say, hey, let's start a new campaign. Here's what you do if you wanted to start either a brand new campaign in Numenera, or you have a campaign and you want it to go to a new location. Both those sort of options are handled. So we provide the city, we provide character background, we give a lot of in-depth maps of various locations within the Jade Colossus, but very significantly, we also provide a very robust rune mapping engine, we call it, and it is essentially a way to just create, it's like 36 pages long. Did you count the number of pages in this 190-page book, 160-page book? That's basically devoted to helping you generate through both tables and prompts and guidance and advice, your own crazy ruin, both of which can help you connect the various key locations that we give you within the Jade Colossus through connecting using this rune mapping engine, also creating completely new runes of your own and in your own crazy Numenera campaign. So that's my 20-second description of Jade Colossus.
Cool. So we have a couple of events coming up to promote Jade Colossus. One of them is weekend of the 15th and 16th. We're having this thing called the Ruination event, where members of the MCG asset team are running an excerpt from the book, the Yovok Hive, I believe, which is on the exterior of the Jade Colossus.
Yeah, that's right. There's a couple different entrances that people have made, punctured, and one of these entrances was made by this tribe of abhumans called Yovok. And yeah, it's called, so there's a pre-keyed encounter area called the Yovok Hive. So it sounds like that's what people are going to get a chance to play with.
Yeah, we have more information about that on the appearances page on the MCG website. Basically, we're having stores sign up to have people run these events, and you'll just get an early sneak peek of Jade Colossus there. The next one we're doing is actually an adventure that you wrote, set in the Jade Colossus. It's Escape from the Jade Colossus. That's our Gen Con adventure. So people will have an opportunity to play that at Gen Con, and we're also having an event that we haven't advertised yet, but it's called Recursion GC17, which is we are going to be having the Gen Con adventure for play in game stores the weekend of Gen Con. So we'll have an announcement about that on the website. So anybody who's really curious about seeing Jade Colossus, check out the Ruination event on July 15th and 16th, and keep your eyes open for the Gen Con event. So even if you can't make it to Gen Con, you'll be able to play this Gen Con adventure.
Cool. I had not heard of that before, so that's cool news to me too.
Well, we're all busy, and I got to keep some secrets from you. So Jade Colossus is pretty weird, because Numenera is weird, but it's weird in that you have this ancient structure that is burst up out of the ground halfway in the town of Ballarat, and people have kind of patched together the repairs, and now it's this site that people explore. You've been playing D&D for a long time and other RPGs since you were a teenager, just like me. Have you had any RPG campaigns in the past that had elements like this that inspired your work on this book?
I mean, I suppose, sure, all of that sort of exploration of especially first and second edition D&D, playing, just being so brand new to the situation. Just being, when you're a kid, right, when you're a teenager and you first pick up an RPG and you say, let's explore this dungeon, right? It's not old hat. It's like the most crazy magical thing in the world because you don't know what to expect. It's all weird. Lots of those things have become, I guess, I don't want to say passe, but we've gotten so used to it, it's not nearly so weird anymore. And so, in that sense, I think Numenera is an attempt to kind of recapture that magical, what's going on, an exploration for exploration's sake. And Jade Colossus just tries to totally fall into that and follow that up as much as possible, provide the GM with a ton of ideas for weirdness in their game. So yeah, in that sense, playing D&D back in the day certainly inspired me, just in its overall feel.
Cool. One of the locations that's inside the Jade Colossus is a place called the Hand of Fury, or there's an artifact or structure called the Hand of Fury. It's this giant hand that performs different fighting moves from all these different forms of unarmed combat. And players who reach that area, characters who reach that area can try and study its fighting moves and learn them. You have studied martial arts yourself, yes?
Yeah, yes, I have.
I know that you and I took some Aikido back in the day, but what are you working on now?
Well, so when I was at Wizards, they had a program for Muay Thai, and so I joined that in 2000-ish at some point, and that the instructor there, the sensei, John Staub, soon thereafter opened up a studio about a half mile from Wizards. and offered Muay Thai, Jiu Jitsu, and basically general MMA type stuff. Also Jeet Kune Do. So I did all that for years. So much to the fact that I actually was an associate, a student instructor for both Muay Thai and Jiu Jitsu, and handled many classes. But I got so much into it that it was to the point of like, do I want to become a writer, stay as a writer, or do I want to transition into doing more, full-time martial arts? And I'm not 27 anymore, and it just seemed like writing was the better time. And then there were some moves in my life. So anyway, all that said and done, I'm not studying that anymore. I'm studying a completely different style, which is Kempo, which is kind of Okinawan karate. It's the kind of karate that was the predecessor of more formalized Japanese karate. And that's going really well, and I'm really enjoying that. So that currently it's Okinawan, it's Kempo, but prior to that it was a lot of Muay Thai, Jeet Kune Do, and which owed a lot to a lot of these different traditions as well, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which a lot of submissions, a lot of hand manipulation and submissions as well, which is also big in Kempo, as I'm discovering. So that's awesome.
Interesting. Cool.
So anyway, the question that I had chosen to answer was, what kind of music was I listening to? Basically, I listen just to all sorts of soundtracks, film score soundtracks of various sorts, and it's not anything in particular, just something that doesn't have a lot of words. Also listen to electronica dubstep to kind of get things shaking up my brain. Also some ambient black metal, which is people screaming a lot, but not so many words. But that kind of does the same sort of like wall of sound sort of thing to keep me going, to keep me. Sometimes there's a lot of traffic or things outside, or I don't know, just kind of feels like I'm cut me off from the world. So that's generally the kind of music. I can't give you any groups in particular because it's just such a mix.
We do have some people in the chat room. If anybody has a question from the chat room, just post it and we'll bring it up. Next question I have is inspired by, I know that we have Mythar in the chat room. Mythar is actually one of the people who does a streaming RPG channel, and we sent them a preview copy of the PDF of Jade Colossus. They're going to incorporate it into their stream. So
Cool.
We'll have several different streaming groups having Jade Colossus stuff come up. Now, one of them in particular is actually running a game of The Strange. They're not running Numenera, but they're going to incorporate Jade Colossus into the Strange game. Do you have any advice for someone who's running a Strange game who wants to incorporate Jade Colossus?
Well, you can use it at a lot of different levels. You could use it like you go to this weird recursion where the Jade Colossus exists, right? That's pretty straight up. It's the cipher system. But of course, you could also just take elements out of it. A lot of the Jade Colossus, a lot of the suggested encounters in Jade Colossus and the keyed encounters for that matter are a little darker in some ways than I would potentially normally have written for a Numenera adventure at Gen Con. So that kind of suggests that you could use a lot of this material for weird, horrific sort of mini recursions, right? There are some recursions that are kind of horrific in the Strange already. Not all, of course, all the ones that are seeded by real-world fiction that's kind of dark and horrific, but also there's one called R639, which is kind of this anomalous recursion that doesn't really seem to have been seeded by fiction. It seems to be its own weird, horrific thing, that things are weird and not really well understood, except that it seems to have been like our real world, except everyone seems to have been has been dead for like 2 months, but they're weird entities. They're still kind of stalking around this place. So some of the elements in Jade Colossus and R639 could go really well together, I think.
Cool.
If you have a Strange game with recursions and you say that Numenera is a recursion, obviously entities from recursions can gain the spark and come out of fiction to your world. So some of the entities and some of the NPCs and creatures in the back of the book, or some of the relics themselves. These are like the Hand of Fury Sean was talking about before. There's a few of these weird, people don't really understand what they are. They don't know why they're there or what their purpose is, but they're these kind of humanoid but not human massive, larger-than-life relics, including hands, eyes, um,
Oh.
mouth of exaltation, and that's what these people call them anyway. And they have these really dangerous things. So sometimes these relics can come alive, right? And if one of these awakened relics were to actually gain the spark and get out into the real world, you would actually probably have a planetivore on your hands. So there's that option as well.
So speaking of the strange, earlier this year, your novel, The Myth of the Maker, was published.
Yes.
There you go.
I happen to have it here. Very handy. Myth of the Maker. Get it now.
So this was the novel, the story idea that you had that Monte suggested you turn into a campaign setting, right?
Yes. So I was writing. I wanted to write a science fiction novel, and so I was working on it for quite a while. The idea, and the idea finally gelled when my then friend Tora Cottrell said, why don't you just take one of your fantasy characters, the idea of that, and make a science fiction version of that. I'm like, okay, I can do that, and that kind of broke the logjam of me getting started, and I decided I wanted to answer the question of Fermi's paradox, which is why do we detect no other life in this entire universe, which seems to be otherwise perfect for life. And so that was my idea for Myth of the Maker, and the strange is what the characters in the book call dark energy. And dark energy, according to my conception for my science fiction novel, was actually a massive galaxy universe-spanning artifact that had broken down billions of years ago. It was created by, this network is initially created by aliens to actually quickly transfer themselves across vast distances, between galaxies, within and between galaxies. That broke down a long time ago, and the strange is what we have now, which not only is this really dangerous place, but planetivores, these entities I was talking about, can come out of them when higher tech civilizations ping it with either really high enough level particle physics or really intense mathematical calculations that can probably only be done using really highly developed quantum computation. So that was my idea, yeah, and Monte said, I was telling him about this idea and how these characters were kind of finding out about this place and how the Earth could be saved, and I apologize, and that's right, Monte said, why don't you and I write a game system based on that? And that's kind of how that came to be about. That's why the game system, The Strange, came about years before the novel, which just came out this year, came out. So, but I was happy to finally be able to finish the novel, thanks to MCG and Angry Robot Books, who's our publisher, to get that out. And people seem to like it. So if you haven't read it, have any interest in world-spanning science fantasy, and find out what the answer to the Fermi paradox is, hey, try out Myth of the Maker.
So are there any secrets of the strange campaign setting that you kind of tip a hat at an answer for in Myth of the Maker, or is this a book that's going to just create a bunch more questions for the GMs and players to incorporate into their own campaigns?
I would say that it provides a lot of very specific examples of the sorts of things that people, are hinted at in the core book. If you're a player of the core book, right, it tells you, here's a very specific example of what Jason is thinking. Here's how he works, right? Jason Cole being the betrayer in the recursion of Arden. And hey, you keep hearing about this Carter Morrison. Well, he's one of the main characters. In fact, his POV chapters are told in first person, as opposed to all the other chapters which are written in third person. So you can get right inside Carter Morrison's head, find out how this Earth discovered the strange and how this entire game system came to being, and what became Carter Morrison, what became Jason Cole, and what's a particular sort of planetivore, which is hovering right out there, is trying to do to bring Earth into its fold.
Okay. Now, this is not the first work of fiction you've written. You've written books for some fiction stuff for D&D, for example. What's something that you really enjoyed about writing Myth of the Maker, either as part of the writing process or the fact that you created the setting and therefore can steer stuff wherever you want?
Well, one of the things I like about writing fiction, especially when I was at TSR, was that I had pretty much complete control over everything. There was no committee of other designers or committees of developers coming along and deciding to do things completely differently. It was kind of my own bailiwick, and of course I had a great editor for most of that time, for my last several books at TSR, who was Susan Morris, in fact. And she's a fantastic developmental editor, which means that she would read the first draft, provide really great feedback and suggestions, and I would then write a second draft based on feedback, right? Or any developmental feedback. And so when I started writing Myth of the Maker, of course, I had left Wizards, so that was going to be the end of that. But my old editor, Susan, turned out to leave Wizards as well, and still doing developmental editing, and MCG hired her to be my developmental editor again. So one of the great things about Myth of the Maker is there's sort of a continuity of writing, both me as the author and Susan as the editor.
Cool.
So that worked out well.
So,
in fact, Susan's in she's in our ongoing game that we're playing tonight. We're playing a playtest game of Invisible Sun. Sean, Monte, and Shauna, and Susan, and me. And that campaign has been going wonderfully. So, to speak of a completely different game system, but a great one.
We're having a really good time. And Susan is great. So I have a question from the internet. Someone has a very specific question about recursions and the strange. So they say when you translate into a recursion, you kind of become just a person in the world, and you kind of have always existed there. You're part of that story in that world, right?
In a sense. You take on the context of that world, and people who don't have the spark, who are in that world, the natives that are just kind of these shadows that exist, they don't necessarily notice you. Yeah, to them, you're not out of place unless you go out of your way to slap them in the face and get their attention. You just kind of fade in, and they're like, oh, they don't notice.
So they don't really have any continuity issues if you appear and disappear in that recursion. Not in front of their face, but if you walked through a door and turned and left the recursion, and then came back a week later, you'd still be somewhat familiar to them, and they wouldn't really be wondering why you were gone for a week.
I mean, different situations are going to be handled differently, but generally speaking, yes. I mean, if you come into the recursion and you make a lot of changes, you make a name for yourself, and you disappear for a month, and you come back, yes, people are going to notice you were gone for a month. I mean, it's not the narrative. I mean, the narrative can only handle so much, I guess. Then again, sometimes recursions do reset, especially if it's a small, limited recursion, and it's just kind of playing out a particular fiction over and over again, right? That is certainly some recursions loop, sort of like time loops.
Right. Okay.
Others do not. They just move forward and lay down history like the normal timeline in our normal universe.
So back to Jade Colossus. The meat of it is the Numenera Ruin mapping engine. And that gives the GMs a lot of tools for customizing the Jade Colossus or other ancient Numenera ruins for their particular campaign. So we think that people who like old school exploration of dungeons and the kind of gritty do-it-yourself aspect of a lot of the original RPGs are going to really dig this book because of the Numenera Ruin mapping engine. Can you just give people listening a little bit of insight as to how this works and how they can use it to inspire their own weirdness in the campaign?
Sure. Well, so basically, there's a lot of guidance, like I said, for using this engine. And the heart of the engine is basically there's a main feature table, and then various and sundry sub-feature tables that speak to each of those features, right? And so the main feature table starts off simply and gets more and more exotic as you go along. So you have corridors, chambers, creatures, interstitial cavities, ruptures, shafts, colonies, integrated machines. These are all like main features, right? So you maybe say, okay, I want to start with a room, right? What's beyond this? I roll on the main feature table. Oh, maybe I get a matter leak, or maybe I would get a weird event, or a vault, or a relic chamber, right? And each of these results has one or more subtables that are between 1 and 20, or for the chamber table, for instance, there are actually two 1D 100 results things that you can mix and match together. But most of these things are percentile tables that have dozens, 40, 50, 60 different options or more on them, if not even more than that. But as Sean was suggesting, there's a lot of guidance in here for how to use these results, not as if like the dice are determining it, this is how I must do it. What this is you're making calls and interpreting results as the GM, right? If the dice show an interstitial cavity of X and Y size and it's not going to fit inside your thing, well, you're the GM, right? These are prompts. These are design prompts that we're giving you to help create a perfect, awesome, weird ruin of your own creation, right? Just change the conformation, change the ladder, change the direction, make it smaller. Use it as a design prompt. Don't say, well, or you can even say, hey, maybe it's an extra dimension for interstitial space, right? So you can go a lot of different ways to use these design prompts to create your particular unique ruin. Of course, yes, you could just let the dice fall where they may, but making a ruin, making a series of encounters is also something of an art, right? And at some point, you need to think of characters are going to be coming through here. Is there an interesting story arc that is being suggested to me as I put down these things, as I make these encounters? Maybe these creatures in this abhuman colony that I rolled here, and I rolled some other random adventurers over here, explorers. Maybe they've had some sort of encounter. Maybe there's some sort of tense situation going on. Maybe the players have an opportunity to resolve this tension or release these prisoners. Maybe they've been taken prisoners, right? There's so many different ways that you can create small story arcs with the basic fundamental building blocks that are provided in Jade Colossus.
Cool. We have a question from the chat room from Robert. He asks, what is one of the more difficult parts of game design for you, and what ways or methods do you find useful in managing them?
Both the most difficult parts of game design. I think sometimes when you're in the middle of a project, you're a month and a half or 2 months into a 3 or 4 month large game, is keeping up the momentum and keeping up the excitement, and being like, oh my god, I need to take some time off. My brain is mush, right? And not necessarily having the timeline to do that. So the way that I manage that difficulty is trying to really understand my deadlines ahead of time, and trying to get as far ahead as I can while I can, because I know there's going to be these dead spots in the middle where my attention is lacking. And if I need to give myself a day or 2 days to not write, or only write 1,000 words as opposed to 2,000 or 3,000 words, or whatever it happens to be, I can do that and not be like, oh, the whole thing is shot, right? So schedule control and knowing exactly where I am at all times helps me overcome that particular difficulty. I don't know if that's exactly where you're going, but that for me, that's the most difficult thing. Staying on track and making sure everything gets turned over on time. And I do it all the time, but it's not easy. it's not something that comes easy for me.
It's interesting you say that, because among people who've worked with you, you have this reputation of getting stuff done. Like if we give you something, and it fits into your schedule, you'll get it done. You won't complain. You're just like a machine. And so I think your scheduling really has a lot to do with that. We just know that we can depend on Bruce to get the project done, and it'll be cool. And he's not. See,
I've learned that you think that, right? Which just puts more pressure on me. So.
Well, I apologize for that.
No. It's probably one of the reasons I was able to stay with the company as long as I can leave on my own terms, because of that early reputation. So yeah, scheduling, knowing how many words a day you're going to write, how many words per hour you're going to write sometimes.
Do you ever have writer's block?
I have writer's malaise. So that's what it is, I think, right? It's this particular thing of like, just getting your butt in the chair and writing is, I guess, sort of what people would call writer's block, but I would call it, no, it's just writer's malaise. And so sometimes I just get up, walk outside. I have a home office now, and even if I can get away from the desk for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I'd come back and write another 2 paragraphs. Then if I have to get up again and walk around, whatever. But so some days it's like that. Other days it's like, oh, it's great.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar in that way. It's not that I sit down and try and write and nothing comes out. It's just sometimes I have a hard time finding the motivation to actually sit down and work on the project. But your scheduling is a really good idea for that. But my timeline is so weird. I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning last night, working on the Cypher System creature deck, and then here I am. So.
When I was up at like 10 or 11, or whenever I was teching, you're like doing this. I was like, maybe I'm not doing anything. Maybe I need some more on my schedule.
So one of your upcoming projects that we haven't really announced yet is you wrote the next season of Cypher Play, which is the one that starts in September of this year. That's our organized play program of in-store adventures, but this one is a little different. Can you tell us about how the Words of Power scenarios are different than what we've done before?
Well, the Cypher System, of course, is the system that underlies all our various different settings, Numenera, The Strange, Gods of the Fall, and Predation now that just came out. And as you know, if you have the Cypher System rulebook, we support all the genres, and we have guidance, suggestions, and specific creatures, and all the foci for all the different genres, especially now that we've come out with a second companion book to the first Cypher System core book, which is Expanded Worlds, which offers more genres. Anyway, so we wanted to explore a new genre. The previous Cypher Play games, seasons had been in Numenera, and we thought, well, let's just change it up and do straight up fantasy. And so Words of Play is basically set in a fantasy game, a fantasy setting. We don't specify a lot of names, so you actually could have it be within your own favorite fantasy setting, whatever that might be. And essentially, I think the idea is that I don't know how much I want to give away, but basically, you go to various different places, gathering, as you might guess, these 5 words of power, because you need these 5 words of power for a very important task. But each one of the places you'll go in this fantasy setting, it's kind of interesting. There's different things going on. There's different fights. There's different puzzles. There's different interactions and social things to kind of bring the whole arc together in a satisfying way. And I have to say, after not writing straight up fantasy for several years now, since I've been working on The Strange and Numenera, it's kind of cool to get back to it, because I worked on D&D from 95 to 2013, yeah, something like that. And so it was very cool. So I hope people enjoy it. I hope that after. So if you want to play it while it's fresh, you'll have to go to your stores in the fall and play in it. So I recommend doing that. And I think probably a year later, at some point later, we'll probably end up selling it. But who knows, right? You never know. So if you want to check out Words of Power, you should go to your local game store and say, hey, do you have a Cypher Play from Monte Games? Because you should.
And it's free, so if they're reluctant, it's just free adventures. Why not?
That's right. We send them like a whole package, like the game stores, right? And something they can just enhance their stores by offering these games.
All right, let's jump back to Jade Colossus. I do want to let people know that we're probably going to wrap this chat up in around 5 minutes, because Bruce and I both have to head out to a design team meeting later today. So if anybody in the chat room has another question, feel free to post it. I've got a couple other ones saved up. We have a question from the internet, and we kind of answered this when you were talking about the Ruins mapping engine, but this person asks, how much is Jade Colossus and Open Sandbox?
So yeah, I touched on that, I guess. So the Open Sandbox, meaning players can pretty much roam where they will. The GM were just willing to go with that, right, and tell players that, yes, just explore, right? That's kind of something that the room mapping engine will totally allow, right? Oh, there's three unknown exits from this weird chamber. What's behind them? Explore and find out, and the room mapping engine will tell you. And then what's beyond that? What's beyond that? What's beyond that? And you can go as long as you wish to the ends of that particular structure. So.
And it's set in the middle of the town of Ballarat, which is the ruin itself. The Colossus is in the town of Ballarat. It crashed up through Ballarat, which is They've kind of repaired it, and so there's still a bit of a city there. We have about 10 or 12 pages on that city in the book, which I think is more than we've done for most actual settlements in Numenera. So it's actually a really cool source for people to use just as a hub for their campaign. Even if the characters don't want to explore the Jade Colossus, the town of Ballarat is a neat place that has a lot of there's a lot of Numenera artifacts and stuff cycling through, and so if players use it as a home base, they could probably end up easily swapping out technology if they need it and planning ahead for that sort of thing.
As it happens, Ballarat is in the country of Navarine, and if you look on the map, you'll see that it's weirdly almost equidistantly located between the Amber Monolith and the Fountain of the Water God. It's not Fountain, but these two other large ruins that exist in Navarine. Now I've got to pull it out. Obelisk of the Water God, and the Amber Monolith. So it's on the Tith River, and so which is a great trade path for boats between these places. So yeah, there's a weird sort of congruence potentially. Maybe it's just coincidental. Who knows?
Cool. So a question from the chat room from Exec Tech. What process do you use to write adventures?
That's a hard question to answer. I guess the process I use is to try and be inspired by an interesting idea, and then flesh everything out from there. The interesting idea being like an arc or a central idea, a central plot point. So I recently, since we're talking so much about Jade Colossus, I wrote the adventure for Gen Con called Escape from the Jade Colossus, right? And I guess it's kind of cheating in that sense that I had just written this entire source book, so I just I looked through all the various threads that I had generated for potential campaign arcs, and one of them suggested that one of the NPCs in town was trying to cure this strange contagion that had potentially come out of the Jade Colossus. And I was like, well, what if, what if this is the adventure? PCs are the ones who help this guy try and get some samples from this mother fungus that they think is the cause of this contagion. But something goes wrong as they're trying to leave. They've already come in, they've already got the material, and they basically get trapped. And they have to find a new way out, different from the way they came in, unexplored, which kind of speaks to all the Jade Colossus's strengths of like, we don't know where we're going, we have to explore, it's crazy and weird and dangerous. And there are a few other complications, of course, thrown in there as well, that makes it just finding a new way out even more difficult.
So you've been working on a lot of different things recently, from Jade Colossus and The Maker and Ninth World Bestiary 2, and you wrote the Predation adventure for Gen Con and the Jade Colossus adventure for Gen Con. Have you snuck any Easter eggs in any of those, like a secret call out to a friend or your pet? Like for a long time, I used to sneak my white Labrador Nilla as a character in various adventures that I wrote. So if there's ever a white dog that shows up, that's an homage to my dog.
Oh, I guess I've put pets into novels that I've written before. I put my male cat CC, in one of my Sword of the Gods novels, and my male dog Hector was in the Abelethic Sovereignty novels. He was called Lucky in those. But that wasn't so much an Easter egg because no one would ever know that those were my animals, I guess. But I recently, Shauna and I wrote the Kadar Complex, which is the Predation adventure. And I did put an Easter egg in there, and people who see it and know this, some people will get it and totally understand it. Other people won't know, right? But it is a fun Easter egg, I think. Small, but kind of cool. I don't want to ruin it because it's an Easter egg.
Right. And if it were obvious, it wouldn't be an Easter egg. So part of the fun of it is knowing the secret to it.
Right, and so Kadar Complex, like I said, Predation is Shauna's setting that we just came out with. And if you can't be at Gen Con to play the Kadar Complex, I'm sure as we often do, probably every time now, we always put the adventures, our Gen Con adventures up for sale as PDF products a few months after the event. So you can look for it then and find the Easter egg.
And if you can't make it to Gen Con, we are going to have the in-store event the weekend of Gen Con running those adventures. So keep an eye on the appearances page of the MCG website. So we are at 45 minutes now. We're going to wrap this up because Bruce and I have our meeting. Bruce, thanks a lot for coming and taking questions from people. Any final words?
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't know who's there and watching, but thank you guys for showing up, and everyone else who's watching this later on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, you can always ask us questions. Find us on the Twitter, Facebook, and wherever we are, and hopefully we can help you out.
Awesome. So Myth of the Maker is available now from various retail stores and the MCG shop. Jade Colossus is on pre-order right now, and its release date is in August. Thank you very much for coming to our chat, and have a great day. Thanks, Bruce.